awkward talking to the microphone, but it's for the live stream. Okay, now I'm talking to microphone. So good evening. My name is Matthew Beck. I'm the superintendent of schools here in Sparta. This is Ms. Tara Rossi. She's the assistant superintendent. For a few months now, probably since January, we've been running community forums every month, once a month. We've been trying to mix up how we've been running them, in person, remotely, during the day, in the evening, in the afternoon, trying to hit a bunch of different crowds, trying to get as many people involved as we could. So this is our community forum, our final one for the school year, obviously the June community forum. And none of them really had a theme. What would happen during our normal community forums was Ms. Rossi and I would speak about some great things that are going on in the district, some initiatives that we're running, and then we would open the floor to some questions. We never really had a theme, but we thought it to be super important and super appropriate to have a theme for this evening's, right? Because we are working on the new curriculum for the new standards. And part of the process that we and the admin team and the board agreed upon was that as we continue to develop the curriculum based on the standards, we were going to engage the public, which is what we're doing tonight. So what we're going to do this evening is Ms. Rossi and I, mainly Ms. Rossi, will go through the standards and talk about what the standards actually are that the state is mandating. I just want to make clear that the standards that are coming through are mandated by the state. And that determines what goes into our curriculum. How we teach it is where we have a little bit of wiggle room, we have a little bit of leeway, and that's part of what we're going to discuss this evening. So we're going to get through the presentation portion of things, and then we're going to open the floor for some questions and comments. So I would just ask that this evening, we have a hard stop at 7 because we have to set up for our board meeting, which starts at 7:30. So please hold your questions to the end if you can. And let's make it a nice dialogue at that point and keep it respectful. I know that this is a very controversial subject and one that can elicit a lot of emotions from people. So we're going to work our way through it together. Yes.
Sorry, just because it was a question as some of you were coming in. So basically what we're doing here tonight is we have begun work as curriculum teams at every grade level, and we have a really good start, pretty much a conclusion to the curriculum. Before we finalize it, this opportunity is to get additional feedback for questions, recommendations. I've had a lot of great phone calls with people who've reached out with some great recommendations or considerations that other districts were doing and have we considered this. So this forum is an opportunity to get your feedback, and then from there we will finalize documents and we will submit those to the board probably either in July or possibly August. There are lots of new curricula that are being developed based on new state standards like visual performing arts, science, social studies. So we will submit that to the board, and then they will vote to approve all of the curricula on another night. So either at the July board meeting or probably most likely the August board meeting. And at that point, after it's board approved, then it will be posted online for you to see all of the components of the curriculum before school starts, which you'll basically know about all the components of the curriculum tonight, but the formal document won't be able to be released until it's board approved. At that time, I plan on having another session to walk you through how to look at those curricular documents for those who are interested, or maybe do some kind of recording, just because it's not always as user-friendly as one might imagine. If you're in education, you know how long and sometimes cumbersome that could be. So nothing is approved tonight, nothing's finalized yet, but we're gonna give you a lot of specific information because we have that for you and we know you've been asking.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start this evening with the goals and the philosophy and the implementation. The goals of this evening are to share our plan for implementation, to present accurate information related to the curricular development. A lot of facts are going to be presented to you tonight, and to seek productive feedback and partnerships. This is what we just talked about. That's why we're having this forum, so that we can get feedback from the community. And our goal here too is to remain open and transparent about this process. We want to have productive communication, and we wanted to continue to develop, which we've been trying to do all year through these community forums, the home-school partnership. Maybe, Ms. Ross, you want to talk about the philosophy versus implementation portion?
I also want to say to those of you watching the live stream or here who can't see the small print, this will be available, this slideshow will be available on our website in the next day or so you could view it that way too. Some of the conversations that we've been having as we're interacting and dialoguing with different stakeholders about these standards are that everyone has a different philosophy, a different point of view, different opinions, different values, and we want you to know that our goal is not, we have to be neutral in all of those ways, so we are not promoting any value set or any philosophy, and we're also not trying to change that on your behalf. So I do think you'll see there's a lot of options in here, and there's an opportunity for us to work together as a team in that way. But what our job is to determine how to implement these standards. And so with that being said, I just want to give you a little background on how that works. So the state develops a set of standards, and basically from those standards, districts get together and they write curriculum. So they determine how they're going to approach the standards, how they're going to cluster the standards, what learning activities and units they're going to establish with regard to the standards. So we have a lot of decisions that we make based on the how we teach these standards. So what the state gives us is the what. These are your skills and your standards that you're mandated to teach. And then it comes down to each individual district to decide how we're going to do that and what that looks like. And that's written locally. So again, the standards have been released at the state, and the curriculum is what your local school districts develop. The curriculum has not been released yet, so sometimes there's some misinformation saying that like our curriculum is this, but that's not been released. We're just developing that. So I think that, again, living in the world of education, it's really the standards that speak to some of these items, and then our curriculum, is adjusted and adapted accordingly. From the development of the local curriculum, teachers then write lesson plans. So that takes it even one step further in the classroom, that they have to align their lessons based on this guide, which is the curriculum, which is a series of standards. The health and phys ed standards specifically are clustered by grade level. So you'll have something that says, like, by the end of grade 2, you have to achieve this standard. And so then again, as a local school district, we decide, like, where is that best suited in first grade and second grade and all of the grades, depending on, what the content is and what the standard calls for. And so as we reviewed these standards, what we found is that a large majority of the standards are not new. So I think that what's happening is there are some that are new, and some of those new standards are definitely things that are causing, a diversity of viewpoints, and for sure, just different beliefs and feelings about what those standards are. But those are like few and far between actually in like the large curricular document that are health and PE standards, and I can speak to some of those new ones as we get started. So as a curricular team here in Sparta, and we were talking a little earlier, I was a teacher in Sparta in 2003, right out of college, and I taught here for about 10 years before I left to raise my family. And then I came back as a literacy supervisor, and of course now in this role as assistant superintendent. So I've been fortunate to be a part of curriculum writing for years now. And so one thing I can tell you is how serious teams and the district take that work. It's a very responsible process that starts with teams being put together. We look at the actual curricular document, which you can find online. Usually there's some type of professional development. So we were professionally developed by an expert in the field that kind of helped us make sense of some of the standards. We also used guiding documents, like there's something called, the state put out a clarification document. And all of these things, actually, I'm speaking about the last two items. When it's online for you, they're active links, so you can access them. Things like reminders that in the clarification document, things that are in parentheses are not mandated. They're not the standard. They're just examples that a district might use to achieve the standard. So we, again, at a local level, have say and can make decisions versus which ones of these examples make sense to use with our students versus which examples, we don't feel are appropriate or necessary. We've collaborated with districts across our district factor group. So we work with districts, we're district factor group I, and we compare with high-performing districts like Mendham, Madison, Randolph, Livingston. And we also work with our county schools, so our Sussex County partners, especially when we're working on standards like this, like what are you doing? How are you making sense of this? You know, this was a heavy lift for us too, to have to wrap our heads around the best way to approach this information responsibly, but also meaningfully. So as I shared with you, my phone number is always available for you, my email address. So I've had several people reach out, and I greatly appreciate that. They've shared some interesting insight and some things that have definitely shaped some of our views or approaches on things. And so those conversations have been wonderful. We've worked with Nurse Lil, who's sitting here tonight, so thank you for being here. And she's a certified health education specialist. So she helps with, the teaching of the health and PE standards at Helen Morgan, but also a lens to look at some of this information through. And then, of course, I really can't say enough about the health and PE teachers. I haven't really been interactive in this way with the health and PE teachers before. It's just not been the work that I've done. I have a lot of experience in the world of literacy, but they're really phenomenal and they take their craft seriously. And it's really been a pleasure to really work with them as specialists to understand and unpack this information. So if you look at the standards themselves on the website that you can access that I shared with you just on the last slide, it's just the comprehensive health and PE standards. If you were to access those standards, the first thing you would learn about is the intent and spirit. And when we received professional development, that was something that we talked a lot about, is that these standards, along with many others in different content areas, were created kind of in the midst of this COVID era. And so you're going to see that when we talk about changes, some of the things that we see that are newer are, have a strong focus on health and wellness, on physical, mental, and social influences that affect not only school, but lifelong learning. And also the goal of making sure that students gain the knowledge to care for themselves and interact effectively with others, which again is some of the areas that we've seen, some of the greatest struggle right now. The health and PE standards are made up of these core disciplinary concepts. So I'm not going to read them to you, but there's a long exhausted list. Some of them, again, you'll see that there's an overall focus on wellness, and that can come to life in many different aspects, whether it's nutrition, personal safety, social and sexual health, emotional health, or personal growth and development. So a lot of the standards come from a place of developing wellness and safety in students. Again, these slides are going to be hard for you to read. I'm going to share them with you, and you can access them online. So far, in our K2 grade band, this is the work that we've done curricularly. So first of all, it's an integrated approach. So in grades K through 2, students don't have health class. Health is integrated in phys ed, and it's usually like the first 10 to 15 minutes of a class, and that might happen. Students have phys ed twice a week, I believe. And so it might be like one lesson every 4 weeks or something to that effect. So health is not a major portion of our elementary curriculum, but because of the nature of the standards, it is easily infused. In our physical education standards, we have 4 units so far that have been developed, and they focus on things like fitness, active lifestyle, goal setting, movement and safety, cooperative games, and object manipulation. Many of those standards are not new. And I'm clustering those together because what happens is at a kindergarten level, the interaction of those standards or skills is at a basic level. And then as you move through first and second grade, it becomes more intricate or more detailed, how they're completing some of these things like physical manipulation, let's say. In terms of our health unit, we have one health unit. In kindergarten, the health unit focuses on hygiene, healthy habits, self-control, making good choices, and identifying feelings and safety. Again, those aren't new, so that has been our kindergarten unit that's been infused over a series of lessons for the last few years. In first grade, we look at things like wellness strategies, managing emotions, healthy relationships, family safety, nutrition, and gender expression and stereotypes is the new standard. When you look at the clarification for a standard like that, the way we're handling that standard is basically what it's calling for in the clarification, which is just looking at the fact that there are in fact stereotypes. And so we're talking about, and actually they talked about in the past that there was a dance lesson that they did with students, and on the board or on the projector, for the dance lesson, there's a boy dancing and there's a girl dancing. And the boy does certain moves and the girl does certain moves. And part of what their feedback to students are, so we're gonna engage in this dance activity and you see, the boys and the girls dancing however they are. You can dance however you want. Maybe not like them, maybe how the boy dances or how the girl dances. There's not a certain expectation of how you dance, just that you enjoy the music and you express yourself through dance. So we already do that activity, and to add to that, we're talking about things like ways people express themselves. So through the activities they participate in, through colors, their favorite color, or through hairstyles. So we're talking about kind of surface level interaction at this point, and just that you can choose to demonstrate. Just because you're a boy doesn't mean you have to like the color blue. Just like in the dance video, just because you're a girl doesn't mean you have to dance that way. So these are kind of natural conversations that they've been having, and that's how we're going to continue to cycle that standard into what we're doing. In terms of resources, most of these resources are just discussion based, and that's because we don't have time. We're like in a gym, we're in a phys ed class. And so one of the conversations that will be a part of that activity is just going around the classroom and sharing some of your favorite activities that we've done in here. Just showing the random sampling that, whether you're a girl or a boy, it doesn't matter. You can like, whatever activities you like. And sometimes that's shared and sometimes that's not. In grade 2, our health standard, our health unit will focus on managing emotion, stress, conflict resolution, medicine safety, and an introduction to alcohol and tobacco. Those are not new either. What's new is what we're defining as our family life unit. And so the family life will just be one shared lesson, is actually an approach that we're taking to this standard. And so we've had a lot of conversation about the standard of naming the body parts, including the genitals, and the notion of what reproduction is and how parents care for their offspring. We feel it's challenging and to discuss sensitive material like this in a gymnasium with 24 kids. And we also feel like some of the resources that are available, because this is new, we don't feel are best suited right now. And so for next year, we would like to, almost like a flipped lesson, make this a shared lesson where we urge and we would send home speaking points and almost like a modified lesson plan to ask to partner with families. This is like the first lesson where you're unpacking sexual health, and we would like you to do that. And so we're gonna put something together where you focus on the body parts reproduction, physical contact, good touching versus bad touching, and the circle of trusted adults. And then when the students come in, we will re-emphasize the idea of, the importance of keeping hands to yourself and physical contact, and also the importance of a circle of trusted adults. Our goal is to make sensible decisions based on the information that we have and our expertise. One of the things about the standard that we learned, and I know again that this is sometimes concerning for people, or like, why is this standard all of a sudden coming up? But what we've learned is that it's really important, and again, we would urge families to partner with us in this way, but there's research out there, quite substantial research, that says when you refer to your child's area as private, predators prey off of that children won't speak towards, inappropriate things that are done. And so by using the correct name, research shows that children are highly more likely to report sexual abuse when they know the correct names for their body parts. And unfortunately, sexual abuse is incredibly on the rise. So we feel like this is extremely important, but we also understand the role that you play as parents. And so we want to partner with you to make sure that our students are protected, informed, and educated based on the really important information that is shared with us through statistics and research that's coming out from the field. So that's K2. I'm going to move on, and I'm not sure if that's the best way, if I just keep going, and then you can come back to any questions that you have. In grades 3 through 5, we also have an integrated approach, so you don't have health lessons in a classroom. Well, you do, that's not true. You do have health lessons in a classroom, but it's not in the same way that you have a semester of it or a cycle of it in middle school or high school. And so in grades 3 through 5, for physical education, we talk about fitness, cooperative games, object manipulation, similar to what I described in grades K through 2. It's kind of like on a continuum of sophistication. So as students grow and mature and develop, they're doing some of these things in a more sophisticated manner. For our health units, and none of that is new. For our health units, we have 1 unit in grade 3 on safety and nutrition. That's not new. In grade 4, we have 2 units which talk about emotional and personal growth and development. And our family life unit in grade 4 is 1 to 2 lessons that focuses on puberty and adolescent development, which is not new. My 4th grader just engaged in it, and he'd probably be humiliated that I just told you that on a public live stream. But these are normal conversations, and thank you, Nurse Lil, because this was our first experience, and it went really well. In grade 5, there will be 2 units, one that focuses on alcohol, tobacco, drugs, personal growth and development. And there always was a family life unit in grade 5 that talked about sexual development, but there are some new components to it now. So we have to talk about some different types of pregnancy, and then we have to talk about sexual orientation versus gender identity. So that's expanded from what it was to what it is now. As I'll share with you as we continue moving on, and as you probably know this already, but so again, everywhere else, grade 2, we recognize this is new, and we agree that there should be a shared approach to it. In all the other grade levels, it's not, the concept of a family life unit isn't new. So they've been engaging in this, development and instruction for years, but the instruction is shifting a little bit. So what we learned from having articulation with middle school teachers is that some of the content they're learning in grade 5 was more, in the past, it was more aligned to what they would be learning in grade 6. And so it's not that they were never learning some of these things. Some are new, but most of these things are things that they were learning in 6th grade health class. In all of the family life units, which I'll talk about at the end, there is an opt-out option for you. And so I'll talk about what that entails and what students would be exposed to with if you were to participate in that. Okay, so grades 6 through 8 is our next. No, I did say that. Gender orientation versus, hold on. Yeah, no, I said family life. I read them off to you. And I said that is new, sexual orientation versus gender identity. That is not a standard that was in our 5th grade health and PE standards before. So that will be new. Also talking about not pregnancy, but the different types of pregnancy. And they gave 2 examples of IVF versus surrogacy. Again, I'll wait till the end to tell you this, but what I've learned from our professionals is that all of the content that they teach is really from a scientific, clinical perspective. So they're talking about, when they talk about something like surrogacy, that a fertilized egg is implanted in, the uterus. And so those are that's the type of language that's used when describing these, any of these standards. I'll tell you as we go through. So this is really, the first one I showed you was in 1st grade, which is, oh yeah, that's not what we're getting into when we teach it. I don't know the answer to that.
We're going to do the presentation first, and then we'll walk them.
Yeah, sure. I'll follow up but we can go back to that, just that there's a difference between, you're talking to kids about puberty and sexual development, so sexual attraction versus how you identify as a person. But we're not talking about, in detail, multiple levels of identification. Just that that is 2 different things. Sorry, this is getting a little funky on me. All right, for grades 6 through 8, so middle school is different than, it's not infused, meaning it has its own class, it's on its own cycle. They meet every other day, usually for one marking period, which is about 5 weeks. In phys ed, you see a lot of similarities, again, kind of growing with a student's mature and sophistication between these different types of physical activities. Thanks, Shane. And in comprehensive health, we have one unit. Grade 6 is there for you, talks about physical health, self-care, emotional wellness, decision-making, peer pressure, media influences, prescription and over-the-counter drugs, immune system, communicable diseases, and bullying. In grade 6, these are not new standards, but where you see an addition is in gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. So again, just distinguishing between those 3 things. They talk about the symptoms of puberty and hormone development, which again is not something that hasn't been discussed before, so that was always part of family life in 6th grade. This is a little bit longer. It's about 7 to 8 lessons was what they say, how long that unit typically runs. It is something you can opt out of. And there was something else I was going to say to you about that. Oh, there's a question about, and this has come up quite a bit, and just misinformation that I think is worth clarifying. So some of the standards, there's misinformation talking about like at what grade level we teach masturbation. Masturbation isn't a skill or standard, so masturbation won't be taught in any grade level curriculum. As I shared with you earlier, that is an example. So there's a standard that talks about like the development of hormones and personal feelings. Again, that's not new, but in the example, it gives that as an example. So local districts can make decisions about what's best. That's not something that we're teaching anywhere, and it would be in a middle school standard. So that's where that example is listed, but that will not be part of our instruction. In 7th grade, we talk about mental illness, community health services, alcohol, tobacco, vaping, illegal substances, drug abuse, and drug dependency. And our grade 7 family life unit is pretty similar to what it's always been, focusing on pregnancy, stages of childbirth. Our grade 8 health curriculum focuses on nutrition, eating disorders, and first aid. And our grade 8 family life lesson is what you see actually, you can't see well right now, but what you'll notice is there are some asterisks and stars next to some of the different family life units. And so in those units, that's where you have some new information. So as I said to you, some 9th grade standards have been pushed down to 8th grade. And so 8th grade, they typically talk about contraceptives, STIs, teen pregnancy, parenting, but you have more of what's new in that standard or in that grade band is the notion of consent, abstinence, and also laws and resources regarding sex crimes. Finally, in grades 9 through 12, a lot of 9 through 12 is very similar. Physical education, you see 10 units focusing on various athletic activities. For grades 9 through 12, it looks a little bit different. So their physical activities actually are quite similar. I probably could have set this slide up the same way. For comprehensive health, there are 4 units that focus on an introduction to health, wellness, nutrition, disease, and conditions. And family life for grade 9 focuses on sexual education, relationships, the reproductive system, contraception, safe sex practices, and the stages of pregnancy. Because some of these standards have been pushed down to grade 8, we have articulation set up so they're in different grade bands, meaning the way the standards organize themselves is they say by the end of grade 8 you have to accomplish these standards. And then by the end of grade 12, you have to accomplish this set of standards. But we're going to look carefully to see what kind of overlap takes place because there are a lot of health standards. So where we can, make sure that we're not overlapping for continuity and efficiency, that's the work that happens as you implement a curriculum. In grade 10, we have our physical education activities. And in grade 10, we don't have a family life unit. We haven't before. Grade 10 is where we focus on learning to drive, driver's ed, the New Jersey motor vehicle laws and regulations. In grade 11, again, you have similar practices for phys ed. We do have a comprehensive health unit, which focuses on mental health, sexual health, healthy and unhealthy relationships. In this family life unit is similar to what we have right now, where students can opt to take care of the baby that they have to care for over time. I won't speak too much to the details, but it's something that's been going on forever that kids love, and it will continue to evolve in that way. For grade 12, we have our phys ed units, and we have our comprehensive health unit, which does not include a family life unit, but does include different levels of first aid, AED, and CPR training. So I think this is our last slide, and then I can open it up for feedback. So in family life, again, that is something that you have the opportunity to opt out of. That's something that's always existed, and it's something that will continue to exist. You'll see that the grades that have a family life unit are grade 2, which is the only grade level that the family life unit is new, and that's the grade level where we're taking a shared approach so that sensitive information can come from the families and parents, and then we can re-emphasize in different ways the importance of taking care of oneself. In grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11 is where those other family life units are. In all of those units, one thing that the health and PE teachers stress is that they take a clinical, scientific, and unbiased approach. So they're presenting information much the same way a science teacher would be presenting information. It's safety-based, so almost all of the concepts and content that is being taught is through the lens of safe practices. When they are questioned, these are some questions that have occurred when I've spoken with different parents or stakeholders. When students bring questions into the classroom, they'll be handled in the same way that questions are handled, quite frankly, in any other content area. Is it relative to the content? Is it related to the learning goal? And if it's not, then that question can be handled outside of class, either with the health and PE specialist, or in many cases, they've shared with me that an approach that they take is that they'll contact home, just to let you know that their kids did have some questions and that you suggest, or that they suggested, that you follow up with your family members, somebody at home that you're comfortable with, so that they could provide more information to you regarding the question that you have. So we'll continue to do that. There was a question about an obscenity law that was presented at one of the board meetings, and we did have that looked over by legal counsel, and that law does not relate to educational standards. So that law is practiced for, to keep students, children safe in other venues, but not related to state-mandated code-based standards. In terms of the opt-out letter, you can send a letter to the principal simply saying that for family life lessons, you don't want your child to participate in them. So you do continue to have choice and say and ownership in the education that your children receive. And there will be alternative instruction provided to them. So the way we've developed it for every grade level is that whatever they're learning in the beginning of the health unit, so let's just say, emotional stress management strategies or nutrition. If they were learning that early in the unit, in the health unit, then when the family life lessons take place, which will always be at the end of the health unit, students who opt out will be given additional support and independent exploration and activities related to the information they learned in the first half. So they'll have background, context, and instruction from a teacher, and then they'll just carry that through in a different setting. And when the family life unit is over, that unit will be over altogether. So they won't be going back into a classroom where other students were just learning about content that maybe you as a parent aren't comfortable with your students, knowing about or learning about. And again, so that will happen at the end of the unit. So we do want to turn this, period over for questions, answers, feedback. We will just ask you again, as we said in the beginning, we know that your kids are important to you. They're important to us too. So we're trying to navigate the best way to maneuver through this as well, abiding by the standards and code, but also being reasonable about the partnership and the shared responsibility that we have. So understand that we're tasked with this work as well. And so if we could just keep the conversation, productive and reasonable and responsible, that would be really important to us. Yeah, perfect. So I'll take any questions, and if it's okay with you, or recommendations, or anything that you feel is important to share as we finalize documents. And if you don't mind, I'll reiterate that as best I can in the microphone so that people on the live stream can hear your feedback, questions, recommendations. And then I'll respond as best I can, or Dr. Beck will as well. Yes. Sure, so I'll take part of that, and then if you want to elaborate, and I don't want to misspeak on the code, but I believe it's chapter 6, chapter 12. It's basically the CUSAC code that mandates that if a district does not implement the New Jersey state standards, you can lose funding. And so that's one of the immediate responses, is that you run the risk of losing funding. The other response is that, to be honest with you, it's a really slippery slope for a district to decide which standards they're teaching and not teaching. If you go back to the math standards back in, 2010 maybe, and they were complicated standards that everybody, all the teachers, parents, were frustrated with because it took a different approach to math. And I know this is a different topic, but just bear with me for a second. If at that time we decided these math standards are ridiculous and we're going to reject them, then that would have had long-term effect and implications. So to make that decision, aside from the fact that you're risking funds, is not really a professionally responsible thing to do. In addition to that, when we look at these standards together as curricular teams, the large majority of them are not new standards. And the standards that have various perspectives and points of view that cause concern, you can opt out of. So for a lot of those reasons, rejecting the standards doesn't make sense in this case for us as a district. Yes, anything that's family life, but just to reiterate, I don't know if you're here for that part, in that shared lesson, we would be sending home a lesson plan with speaking points, and we'd be asking the parents to have that conversation related to that standard. Yes. Yeah, if I could just speak to that, just so I don't forget, you might have more to share, and you can. It will be at the end of the unit. So what's interesting is that in some cases, like at the high school, it's like a rotating, so, some ninth graders have that in the first marking period, and others have it in the second. So it's not necessarily related to the time of the year, but it will always be at the end of the unit, so that it just minimizes the interaction thereafter if that's sensitive material that you don't want your child to, possibly be included in a discussion back in the classroom. So for most of those units, students are back in the gym after that, the end of that lesson. Yeah, I think at this point, we're not rejecting any particular standard. We are making decisions about, like I said earlier, some of those examples, like which examples are appropriate to use or not use. And, I hope that for those who are concerned, you understand that we are hearing all concerns and we understand that there are various perspectives. So we feel like the fact that you can opt out, definitely suits families well who are not interested in students participating. Secondly, we've never in Sparta taken like a radical approach to instruction. So our approach was like, we're not cannonballing into unknown water, so a question you had earlier. We're not going deep into standards we've never touched before and doing PowerPoint presentations on them. Like, we're just touching upon them. And in some cases, in many cases, the feedback has been like, it is the reality around these kids. And so if you're more comfortable with having those conversations, that we completely respect that. If you would like us to, it's gonna be a simple, kind of surface level conversation that still gets to the idea that these are some differences in our world and how we can handle them in an informed way. I shared earlier with you, so I have a child who took part in one of the health and PE family life lessons, and we had a conversation after that, and it was really appropriate. And about 2-3 months later, driving in the car, there was another conversation that was brought to my attention, and that conversation was shocking. Like, what? My first question was like, how do you know that? And the response was that, well, a friend's sibling was looking on TikTok and found this on social media. So the reality is that at a certain level, our kids are exposed in some way. And so one of the things we talked about with the health and PE teachers is really the importance of getting accurate information from trained professionals. And so for all those reasons, we really feel confident that we can handle this in a varied way that meets the needs of the large range of our community, which is what we're trying to do. Yeah. So at this point, they've been kept abreast about everything we've talked about. They're knowledgeable about where we are with the development. We did wait towards the end of the year in a big way because there's a lot of dialogue about the standards, and there was, the state was reviewing them. And so we thought to ourselves, it's not unlikely that they might review these and change some of them. So let's wait and see what happens. So that was by design that, we kind of put that off to make sure that we were working with the actual, expected standards. But we've been having this, this topic has been a topic of conversation for a long time. It's just that as a district, we weren't ready to release all of the details for how we were handling it until we got our curriculum teams together. And did a lot of work, quite frankly. We put a lot of time into taking this seriously and, again, handling it in a responsible manner. And that was seeking information, collaborating with other districts, being innovative with our approaches, really listening to feedback, not just asking for it, but listening to it. And so they know, they're aware of all of that. And I think some are here tonight. But, yes, they've been included the whole time. Thank you. I appreciate that. We appreciate that. Yeah.
No, you can. I was just saying.
Yeah.
I just said to speak to it in general with all curriculum.
Yeah. So, when you design a curriculum, we actually were just talking about this today in fine and performing arts. You're committing and you're building blueprints based on the standards for how you, and by you, the content professionals, how you feel with your expertise, experience, training, how you feel that they'd be best implemented. So once the curriculum, which takes the standards, but then tells you how to address them, once that is board approved, we are mandated to follow that. So you don't just have liberty to just pull a standard and just create a project and kind of do whatever you want, do the shared lesson or not. It's that those aren't options. You have those options when you're creating the curriculum. And then of course, after you implement it, you learn from implementation. So that's when you can go back and reflect and reevaluate and make changes to the document as needed. But the curriculum is binding and is our guide as educators, and that is board approved and mandated. So the cross-curricular connections are actually in the curriculum. So they're identified already, and teachers also have to write lesson plans. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but it came back. So lesson plans are monitored and approved by different, at the upper levels, by district supervisors or by vice principal, but by administration. And so, you can also ensure by checking lesson plans that you are in line with the curriculum, and we do that. Yeah, sure. So this was as specific as I could take you without showing you a curricular document that would take, that really to review the curriculum, you really would want time to do that individually. We could host a night like that, but what I definitely will host is a night to show you how to look at a curriculum document. So you could go through with a fine-tooth comb. That's where you're going to get the most information, almost sometimes too much information. It'll have, and I say that because it could just be a lot to look at, like essential questions, enduring understandings, learning targets, standards, assessment types, materials, modifications. All of those relate to what I just showed you. So what I showed you were like the big picture ideas that will be the focus. I think that when you have a question, you can refer to something like this. You can reach out to me. You can, as the curriculum is board approved, you can look through that very, very closely, for the details that maybe you're referring to. But I do think your leadership is where you're going to get the best information because, as I said earlier to you, just going back to our second grade approach to a shared lesson, the standards don't tell you to do that. So from district to district, you could have districts doing things very differently. So to stay tuned with what's happening in this district, I would focus on talking with leadership teams, curricular development specialists, and we'll all have our contact information available. So it can be through email or by phone, whatever you prefer. But I know that's what's hard right now because you're being inundated with a lot of information and it's coming from all kinds of different places. And some of it is inaccurate and some of it is, but how we handle it, it's important that, and that's the other reason we wanted to have this is that we haven't yet put our narrative out there. So you wouldn't have known, well, how's Sparta doing it? So if you're hearing some of these really radical things, I could see that being concerning because, like, wait, what are we doing? But, you know, like I said, we've never approached curriculum development like that before, and we don't intend to for any purpose.
The New Jersey Herald article on New Jersey sex ed curriculum in review. Have you read this?
I know that it was in review. Have you?
I saw the headline. I know that it is in review.
It's a very interesting article that does create many questions. Without going into detail in front of all these people, they're pretty graphic. And if I was allowed to ask you the questions that I have that are in this article, again, it's something I think that concerns everyone that's in this auditorium right now. So,
Yeah, but listen, by all means, I've been talking about this stuff for months and months. So, you know, if you want to ask a specific question, you can do that now, or you can, yep, sure.
in this article, it says that kindergartners will be doing role-playing for gender identity. It also is going to be mandatory that if you are in first and second grade, they will be taught gender identity. My question is, how do you feel about that, and why is that important?
So I'll share a couple of things with you. So I'm going to grab for you the second grade standard. So here, so the idea that they're role playing, maybe a district out there is doing that. I can't speak to what other districts are doing because we make local decisions, so we are not. The standard so the standard is specifically, it's in the first grade. It says, distinguish between gender expression and gender stereotypes. That's what the standard says. So it doesn't say to role play. It doesn't say to do any of that. And why is it important? So I'll share this with you also. I have my own personal views on all things. And so one of the challenges as leaders is that we don't act based on our viewpoints, because that's dangerous. And that's a really dangerous way to create a biased system in any way. And so you have people who feel that's really important and people who feel that it's not. And so I can't comment on why it's important. Our world is changing, and so I think you are seeing standards that are being put into place because of that, the evolution of our society. It's not important whether I agree or disagree. Of course.
The next question is in the article. It states that before a child is in 8th grade, they will know all about anal, vaginal, and oral sex. Why is that important?
So I had that question. That is a standard, actually. And so that standard relates to sexually transmitted diseases. And so when we had our training, here's how we were trained to teach that standard. Sexually transmitted diseases can be long-term, short-term, or lifelong and have a major impact on your life. They can be transmitted through vaginal, oral, or anal sex. That's how it's instructed.
Again, I have a 7th grade granddaughter. I'm concerned about it.
Yeah, I understand.
My last question is states in here with the 2020 standards that by 5th grade, they will know about hormones and masturbation. Why does my 6th grade grandson have to know about that?
So I shared a little earlier with you that the standard does talk about hormones, and in parentheses it says example, and I could read it to you if I had it here. I do have it here, but the moral of the story is we as a district get to decide what is appropriate inside the classroom. And we don't feel that that's an appropriate conversation to have in a group of 25 students. That's an intimate conversation with someone, a trusted parent or adult at home, and so we aren't teaching masturbation at any grade level. Yes, that is part of the like puberty development. Oh no, we are teaching about those. Yeah, so some examples. Yeah, but we can pick and choose. So if they listed 5, we could choose 4. Yeah, just like I said, because those other examples are things that have been in the classroom and relate directly to prepubescent and puberty onset, whereas masturbation we feel is not a conversation for the classroom. And that's from teachers and experts and professionals who've been doing this for a really long time. Yes, our curricular teams did, yeah. Right. Sure, yeah. Nurse Lil, do you mind? You can stay there, but I just for parents who are, come on up, Nurse Lil.
Well, like, why do you choose one and not the other?
It's just an educational decision. It's the same reason you choose one math textbook over another.
Is it educational or is it your standards, yourself?
Oh, you said clearly not your own. So I've been teaching family life for 12 years, and fifth grade for 10 years, and now at Helen Morgan School, fourth and fifth grade. And specifically in the fifth grade curriculum, to answer your questions, when we talk about the science part, the reproduction part of it, the science part, that is very much of a science lesson. I'll give you a very concrete example from a fifth grade boy. Now you have to realize this is a hot topic, right? So kids are gonna ask questions that they already know the answer to, but they wanna see what I'm gonna say. So I had a young man say, well, why does it have to get hard? And I said, that is a very good question. And I gave him a very long answer about how the penis is part of two body systems. Two body systems. It's part of the urinary system, it's part of the reproductive system. And I went through a detailed explanation of the difference between passing urine and the difference between releasing sperm. And again, all of that, very much from a science lesson. So some of the adults actually learned something when I answered that question in that detail for them. As far as hormones, what we talk about in terms of hormones is that when those hormones start to go through your body, that's when you're going to start to get those physical changes. We do not get into discussions about now boys and girls are going to all start to like each other and everybody's going to want. At a fifth grade level, they can't believe, how many children do you have? If you have 2 children, they think you had to do that twice. That's where they are at developmentally. They think that you know, and I teach them reproduction we have to have for the human race to exist. You yourself do not ever have to reproduce. And the relief on their faces when they hear that is amazing to watch, because they cannot believe that people actually have to do this. So you really have to look at the developmental level of the children that you're working with. So to get into dating and boys and girls and whoever, they're all going to be, liking each other and doing sexual things. This is like, they can't imagine that. So why am I going to take them down a road of a subject that is meaningless to them? What's meaningful to them is how a girl takes care of herself when she has a period. What does a boy do when he has a nocturnal emission and he's freaking out because he doesn't know what happened to him and why? So to say this is nature's way of ridding our bodies of the blood that we don't need for the girls or of the sperm that we're not using for the boys. This is the approach that we're taking. So when we talk about it not being, our own personal opinion, the first thing we do is send a letter home saying it's being taught and encouraging you and asking you to please be a part of this process with us. I hope that helps to answer some questions.
Thank you, Nurse Lil. That was very helpful. It was a collective decision amongst the educators as we, yeah. See, I think you're confusing the standard versus the examples that are optional. The standard is mandatory. The examples are optional. Listen, it's yeah, yeah. Yeah. As Ms. Rossi said, there's not going to be a full PowerPoint on that. It's going to be in a bigger picture. Yeah. So listen, I apologize. I said we had a hard stop at 7. We do have a hard stop at 7 because we have to set up for our board meeting. What we're going to do as a district is we're going to continue to develop this curricula. And I took notes. I definitely have some notes. There were some awesome points that were made tonight. So we're going to continue to take those into account. We're going to continue to work with the Board of Education on these. We're going to continue to keep the public informed. In the meantime, so it was asked, what resources can we look at? Where I forget exactly what term was used, but where are the actual facts? The links that we're going to post this PowerPoint on the website, as Ms. Rossi said, and the first slide, one of the first slides, has the links to the standards, and it has the links to the DOE resources. The standards and the DOE resources are going to be the foundation that is used to create the curriculum. How we teach those standards and the resources that we use and everything else, and Ms. Rossi talked about the essential questions and all that stuff, that's what the curriculum is going to look like. So, which will reflect that. So if we are going to share the curriculum with the community once it is created. In the meantime, if you want to get a head start to see what's going to be in there fact-wise, standard-wise, it'll be within those resources. How it's going to be taught and what resources we're going to use and all that is going to be what's part of the curriculum. Also, in the meantime, as you peruse those resources, please reach out to us. Like Ms. Rossi said, she has had, and I have had, many parents reach out to us. Very nice, respectful conversations, very genuine questions. Please continue to do that because A, that's going to get your questions answered, and B, there's a couple things that were brought up that maybe we didn't think of, even in a room full of educators. Like, wow, we didn't think of that necessarily. So please continue to ask questions that you want answered, and we're going to continue to answer the questions in the meantime. And then when the school year rolls, when we go to approve the curriculum, and then when the school year rolls around, we are going to have a workshop, a community forum, just on how to read curricula because we are using new software for a curriculum, Atlas, and there's a lot of new curricula, not just health and PE standards, but a lot of other curricula that we are writing at this time that we're going to make available to the public, of course. And we're going to show you how to navigate that software to read our curricula once they're created. I think the only thing that would happen there is we get it through committee, and then it shows up on the agenda as an attachment a couple of days ahead of time. Mm-hmm. We're implementing these standards. Well, that's what the curriculum is going to show. This curriculum has to be approved before. This curriculum has to be approved before the school year starts, and we still have work to do. What we're showing you then is a draft that hasn't been board approved. We'll discuss. Why would I say that?
Well, you're saying that we can't see it until it's approved. So, like, what we're trying to say is, like, show us a draft.
Okay, but the fact that I don't care about what the parents think is, I don't think that's very fair. Okay. Okay. I'm just talking about the process. That's what we received tonight. That's what. Okay. Yeah. I said that before it started. Right, and that's when she can reach out to Ms. Rossi. That's what I talked about. Okay. So thank you for attending our public forum. I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody attending our public forum. Please reach out to us with your comments, with your concerns, with your questions. Okay, we'll continue to work with the Board of Education, and continue to keep you informed. Absolutely.
Reach out so it's not public. And it should be a longer before the board longer time to have. We'll show up at 3, we'll show up at 3.
Listen, if we didn't want anything to be public, would we hold a public forum?